Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth Manns and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the October 4th, 2021 edition of the show. It is the week 370 and the 299th show that we have done since the closing of the North Adams Regional Hospital. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as is the custom, we put the emphasis on Article 23 at the start of the show. As it is only Dick and I assume Dick is doing number 1 and number 2?
Whatever way. You want me to do 1 and 3 and you can do 2 and 4?
No, I'm perfectly happy to
I'll
do number 3.
1
I'll
and
tackle
2.
that word.
Okay. All right. Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Section 1. Everyone has the right to work, the free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself or herself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of her or his interests. We also at this time thank Michael Putnam, the program director, and of course our directors in the TV studio for putting on this show. Michael runs the show on Fridays at 6 p.m., at least the audio portion, on the public access radio station, WMNB LP 107.1. And did we want, before we do the moment of silence, talk about Indigenous or after?
We'll just do a moment of silence for the indigenous people that lived in this land prior to Europeans coming.
Okay.
Okay, and now we have a holiday coming up.
Yes, we do.
It's called Columbus Day.
Which there's a movement afoot in opposition to it called Indigenous People Day that they would like to possibly see the name changed to, I believe.
Yes.
In lieu of Columbus Day, given Columbus's history.
Right, and just the Europeans' history and what's happened to the native people. I think a show or two ago, I might have mentioned, I think it was last week even, maybe it was, that about a boarding school in Canada where they had found mass graves.
Oh.
And we didn't talk about it because I didn't have the documentation in front of me. But I do have an NPR show from June 6th of 2021. And there's been subsequent stories about it, and the reason why I brought it up is the bishops of Canada did apologize
For it,
but
yes.
this is on NPR. It says Pope Francis expresses sorrow but no apology for Indigenous school deaths in Canada. And what happened in Canada also happened in the United States too. But it said Pope Francis expressed sorrow Sunday for a gruesome discovery of a mass grave in Canada containing the remains of hundreds of Indigenous children. The remains were found at a boarding school for Indigenous Canadians operated by the Catholic clergy. The quote is, "I join the Canadian bishops and the whole Catholic Church in Canada in expressing my closeness to the Canadian people who have been traumatized by the shocking news." Francis told an audience at St. Peter's Square, according to the translation of prepared remarks, quote, "This sad discovery further heightens the awareness of the pain and suffering of the past." The comments come about a week after the Tekempa Skepeket First Nation in British Columbia announced the remains of 215 children had been found on the grounds of a former boarding school. Indigenous Canadians had known for years that some children never returned from the schools, but this is the first time a burial site had been discovered. And, it says, although Francis expressed sorrow, he never explicitly apologized for the church's role in the forced re-education of more than 150,000 children who were taken from their homes over a period of 150 years during the 19th and 20th centuries. Many of the children were forced to become Christians, were forbidden from speaking their native language, and were often abused. In 2015, a national commission condemned the treatment as cultural genocide. So this is all taking place in Canada, but we have a very similar history.
Yes, we do.
So when we're celebrating Columbus Day, I think we should really think of Indigenous people and what the effects have been.
Yes.
And it's just not an issue of the past.
It's an ongoing issue.
It's an ongoing issue because it seems to be rampant racism that's occurring in this country. I guess a statue was, or a bust of George Floyd was put up in New York City. And it was vandalized within a day. And it was also put up in Brooklyn, and it was vandalized, by white supremacists.
Right.
So, I mean, this racism, it has the roots are deep, but we have to confront it.
Correct. Burying it won't make it go away. It's just, I think we've tried that approach in this country to pretend that it doesn't exist or that we're better than that. And so now it's all bubbling back up.
Right.
After having been suppressed instead of acknowledging it.
And it wasn't
going
just
forward.
Indigenous people
it
or
was
black people treated as slaves, but women.
Women, Chinese, you can go down, Mexicans, you can go down the list.
Right. So we have a lot of work to do, and so maybe we should do some reflecting if we can do some meditation or thoughts about that.
Or read up on the history of Indigenous peoples.
Yes.
And discover their rich culture so you can appreciate.
And we'll try to bring that up each show. We'll try to do a little segment on that.
Sounds good.
So now, do you want to do the video? We have a couple of videos that we were going to show, but one is about the economy.
Correct.
And with Robert Reich. So we thought we would do that one first. We're going to ask Nicole to put that on, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicole.
Skyrocketing wealth inequality isn't just wrong, it's also weakening our economy. 70% of the U.S. economy depends on consumer spending. 70%. So American consumers need to spend enough money to buy most of the goods and services Americans are capable of producing. This means that over the long term, their incomes need to keep pace with their productivity, but their incomes haven't. Over the past 40 years, most people's wages have basically stagnated, while worker productivity has soared. Where did the economic gains go? Mostly to the top. The wealthy now own more of the economy than at any time since the 1920s. Here is the economic problem. The wealthy spend only a small percentage of their income and wealth. Their spending is not enough to fulfill the consumer demand that keeps the economy churning.
We can only go out to eat so many times a year. We can only get so many haircuts a year. We can only get, 3 pairs of jeans will do you. You don't need 300 pairs.
Lower income people, on the other hand, spend almost everything they have, which is becoming very little. Most workers are not earning nearly enough to buy what the economy is capable of producing. The result is a gap between potential output and potential consumption. To fill the gap, the economy depends on people going deeper and deeper into debt so they can buy. Even in 2018, when the economy appeared strong, 40% of Americans had negative net incomes and were borrowing money to pay for basic household needs. The Fed has had to keep interest rates lower and lower to accommodate this buying, and the government has to spend more and more to fill the remaining gap. None of this is sustainable. At some point, widening inequality causes the economy to collapse. We've seen this before. Years ago, Mariner Eccles, chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1934 to 1948, explained that the Great Depression occurred because the buying power of most Americans fell far short of what the economy was producing. He blamed the increasing concentration of wealth at the top. Quote, a giant suction pump had, by 1929, 1930, drawn into a few hands an increasing portion of current produced wealth. As in a poker game, where the chips were concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, the other fellows could stay in the game only by borrowing. When their credit ran out, the game stopped, unquote. While the wealthy of the 1920s didn't know what to do with all their money, most Americans could maintain their standard of living only by going deeper and deeper into debt. When that debt bubble burst, the economy tanked. Fast forward 100 years, and we see the same pattern. While the typical American's wages have barely budged for decades, adjusted for inflation, most economic gains have gone to the top. Just as Eccles' so-called giant suction pump drew an increasing portion of the nation's wealth into a few hands before the Great Depression. The result has been an economy whose underlying structure is far more fragile than it may seem. Remember the housing and financial debt bubbles that burst in 2008? We avoided another Great Depression then only because the government pumped enough money into the economy to maintain demand. And the Fed kept interest rates near zero. And then came the pandemic. The Fed has had to keep interest rates near zero, and the government has had to pump even more money into the economy. While these programs have been crucial to staving off a pandemic-induced depression, they're only temporary. Over the long term, the real worry continues to be on the demand side. Widening inequality means not enough demand. America's wealth gap is now more extreme than it's been in over a century. Until this structural problem is remedied, the American economy will remain perilously fragile. It will also be vulnerable to the next demagogue, wielding anger and racism and resentment as substitutes for real reform. Closing our staggering wealth gap is crucial to the survival of both our economy and our democracy.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. As always, very succinct, direct, and true reflection. I've said many times on the show that the rich can't spend enough money to keep the economy going. Right. And you need the base to have enough money to be able to do the productivity and enable to buy the goods that are being produced and everything else. And if the cycle, and it's not sustainable the way it is, because instead of it being a pyramid like this, it's inverted this way now. All the spending is up with the 0.1%. They have all the money, and the base doesn't have enough. So now we're teetering like this.
Right.
Trying to get there.
I draw from my experience when I ushered at the Williamstown Theater Festival when I was very young. They did a play, and it was called Hay Fever. And I think it was the play that was the basis for the Broadway musical Hello, Dolly. But they had a segment in there. They said, money is like cow manure, you know?
True, yeah.
You know, when you pile it up, it really stinks. But
spread it out.
You spread it around. That's what you got to do with money. You got to spread it around. And I think that's what we're asking for. I mean, it reminds me of, that Martin Luther King book, the one that was published after his death, where do we go from here, chaos or community? And in that point, and I brought this up before, he talked to an economist because they wanted to really help the cities that were devastated, by poverty and slums or whatever. And the economist said it would be a very simple thing. The rich can continue to get richer. It's okay if the rich get richer. They just don't have to do it at such a fast rate. If they were taxed so that money could be redistributed, and I think that's what's going on with this reconciliation bill that we're talking about. It's a small fraction of what probably needs to
Needs.
happen, but everyone says, oh, the price tag, it's
too big instead of focusing on
$3.4
what's-
trillion over 10 years, you know.
And
but-
as if they're going to
but
stay
it's
on that
paid-
path for
but
10
it's-
years.
But it's paid for because people will be taxed that. The corporations
And-
and the people making over, I think it's 400,000
It was, yes.
that originally was set in also negotiating for the drug prices, to lower the drug
Drug
prices.
prices.
That would save a lot of money for Medicare to increase that. But essentially what they're doing is they're finally going to try to attempt to eliminate
A little bit of
the
the-
tax cuts that they gave to corporations and to rich people. And
Over the past 20
Right.
years. And did you read in the thing about how they passed bills for the Pentagon to to purchase more stuff for the Pentagon, but yet they, bill 2 times or if not 5 times more than what they want to do for the human
I think
infrastructure bill?
I saw one I
And
don't know if it was a
it's like we
podcast or
can
it was
get
an
we
article.
can do it for the military, but somehow we
Right.
can't do it for
I
the
think
American people.
over a 10-year period, they only talk
Right.
about 1-year period when they're talking about the military budget.
Right.
But I think what was just appropriated with no debate
No debate.
at all, it was $7.5 trillion over 10 years or something to that
Something
effect.
similar, and
Almost
you're-
twice the amount that we're looking for to eliminate child poverty. You know, when we look at this Constitution of the United States, it says, we the people, in the preamble, it says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America. There's no, defense is just one amongst many of those things. Now it far outweighs it. And it's really welfare, the defense budget's really welfare for a lot of corporations.
It is, yes.
And if you look at the amount of money spent on defense, it's directly proportional to the number of people who are in poverty. The more money you spend in defense worldwide, the more people are in poverty. You know, and we talk about the racism issue. It's not just poor in America; it's poor all over the world.
Yeah.
If we instead
We're
of
not unique in
building
our-
these weapon systems, I consider myself a conservative because I read the definition of a conservative: someone who feels most conservative after a big meal. So I think in order to perpetuate conservatism, we should fill everyone's bellies so they will be also would be conservative. They will be conservative also. So if that's our main goal, set a floor that no one's hungry. But
difficult to achieve in this
and
era.
there's that Pandora papers that have come out. I don't know enough about it, but I've been reading about it on the Washington Post. And it's talking about heads of state and a lot of governments hiding money in the United States and people within the United States hiding money. So there's a lot of money
hidden around
the world that isn't even within the economy because
Not
the
even
people
being
have so
circulated.
much,
Right.
they don't know what to do with it, so they're hiding it. And we use that Gandhi's statement. There's never enough for all of the greed in the world, but there's always enough for everyone's needs.
Correct. There is.
We just have to balance that out. But shifting from the economy, you said earlier you had a flu shot today?
I had a flu shot today, yes.
And you're vaccinated also.
I'm vaccinated.
And I'm
yes.
vaccinated also. I'm very grateful.
Oh, I'm
for
very grateful to be vaccinated.
And
I've been close to people who've contracted COVID since, and knock on wood, still.
Yeah, I
strong.
couldn't wait to get that vaccination. But we have a video that we want to show because at one of the previous show, we talked about a woman who was one of the leading people to get the vaccine going.
Right.
She was a woman born in Hungary. Her father was a butcher. Her mother was a bookkeeper. But she liked science, and she thrived in science. She did all she could in Hungary, but then when her funding ran out there, she came to the United States as an immigrant with her child and her husband, and she started working. No one would listen to her. She had a lot of ideas about this mRNA, but no one saw any value in it. But finally, someone did.
She met someone who did.
So let's watch that video, Nicole, if we can. And it talks about the people who got, the scientists that brought us this this
This
vaccine.
Everybody who knows us knows that we are very different. I am talkative and bubbling, and Drew is more scientific. You are coming from A to B in a straight line, and I am A to B like that. You told me that.
Yeah.
But we try to go to the same place.
It's actually funny the way Katie and I met. Back in those days, the only way you could read journal articles is you had to photocopy them out of the journal. And we would fight over the copy machine to be able to read articles. And we started talking and comparing what each other did.
I was working with RNA, and I learned all of the immunology from you.
We started working on RNA to try and understand why it was so inflammatory. We were both completely open-minded. Any data that we didn't understand, and there was a lot of it, we sat down, we kept doing experiments, we kept getting results, we kept getting excited by the results.
Middle of the night, submitting grants, and 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, sending each other, and you are still up, and I'm still up.
We couldn't have come to the result without both of us being involved.
I was making the RNA, and Drew was checking whether it is immunogenic, not immunogenic. Then he got the data, and we leaned over, and we tried to understand and make sense of it.
Finally, we figured out how to make it non-inflammatory.
And then our mind was all over the place.
Just going in every direction, thinking a year in the future.
We just were amazed that, oh my God, this is what it means.
And after that is when the vaccine field and other RNA fields took off.
Coronavirus officially hitting the U.S.
Cases here in the U.S. have exploded.
All-time highs today in many locations.
When we started this, we weren't thinking about curing pandemics. We were thinking about making new vaccines. We had 5 phase 1 clinical trials of different mRNA vaccines that we were working on before COVID-19 ever hit. And we knew at that time that this had the potential to be an incredible vaccine.
Moderna already tested influenza vaccine, which was mRNA vaccine, 2 years before. It was just the public didn't know about that.
One, two, three.
You will not believe how happy I am. Yay!
Seeing the phenomenal success of vaccinated people being protected gives me incredible amounts of joy.
I was really happy when people wrote me emails and said that they could see their parents and family members. They could meet each other.
We haven't thought of all of the things you can do with mRNA. My family, and I'm sure my lab, is mad at me that I didn't celebrate when the phase 3 clinical trials came in. I had already moved on to something new. We were working on pan-coronavirus vaccines, sickle cell anemia gene therapy, malaria with people across the US and in Africa, leptospirosis with people in Southeast Asia, vaccines for peanut allergies. We're working on really every imaginable infectious disease.
I was always interested about this fragile molecule, this RNA, and still today I am following scientists discovering new things, and I am just fascinated, just like an exciting crime story, and I am so glad that it eventually helps humanity.
I never sit back and rest on laurels. I'm always moving forward. I'm always moving on to the next disease, the next vaccine, the next therapeutic, and that's just the way I think.
We worked together a lot,
Yep.
and we had a lot of fun.
It was a lot of years, but they weren't boring years.
It was very enjoyable. To be a scientist is a joy.
There you go. Oh,
Wow.
well, it is amazing because I think we have this thinking that scientists are just dried up personalities that have no life in them, and then you see these two and you realize that there's humanity and compassion involved in science, that it's not just the numbers and crunching and all that going on. They went in with the intent of a little problem, trying to figure out why this thing wasn't working.
Well, they
And they
knew the
stumbled on it.
potential of it. They knew
Knew
the
it.
potential. Well, she did. I remember hearing her biography on the podcast by the New York Times, because she started studying science, and when she heard about RNA, it clicked in her. She says, "This can
can
do
be
a
like-"
lot."
Yes.
And she went to the people in Hungary, and they didn't even fund her. So then she sold her car and took her husband and her little child, and it was illegal for them to take money out of the country. So they ripped open the girl's teddy bear, and they stuffed the cash they got from selling the car inside the teddy bear, and they brought it to the United States. And she worked for, I think, $17,000 in 1979 when she first came to the United States. She was getting paid $17,000 a year for being a lab assistant. And she kept trying to tell people about what she wanted to do with this mRNA, but no one really would listen. Then she finally met that guy, and he finally introduced her to some other people, and then they started working in labs, and they finally, made the discoveries that the company, which is now Pfizer, came to her and said, we want you to use this to work on flu vaccines. They said, okay, we'll do that. And they were working on flu vaccines, and all of a sudden the pandemic
came.
And
They
then
switched
I can
gears.
remember them calling her and telling her that it worked. She goes, I knew it would. I'm not surprised. I knew it would.
Yeah.
Finally, people were listening to her. I'm just amazed. I'm thankful.
Thankful that she had the idea.
Right. And
back
I just
then.
encourage anybody that hasn't got the vaccine to please get the vaccine. It's in everyone's best interest. It's good for our children. If the
Definitely.
more people that are vaccinated, we have the highest vaccination rate, but we also have the highest death rate in the United States. Because
yes.
people aren't taking the vaccine.
We
So
do. And
we want to.
we want to depoliticize it.
Yeah.
Do it for family. Do it
your
for
research, not on the internet. Read some journals like they did and find out what
magazines.
the truth
Find out what it
yeah.
is and take care of yourselves and your loved ones and your family by doing this.
So we can get power to the people.
Absolutely. And we will not be on the air next week. It's Indigenous People Day and/or / Columbus Day, depending on how you want to remember the holiday.
Say hi to Rachel and Mike. And
Say hi to Rachel
everyone
and Mike
else.
for us.